our second to last science video. Can you even believe it? Gosh, this year has flown by, especially this last part. Holy cow. Okay, so as fast as all that went by, today we are talking about slow land changes. That was really corny. I hope you love it. So, when I say slow land changes, we are going to still be talking about landforms, but we're talking about how those landforms change over time. So, we're going to talk about two different ways that can happen. We've got weathering and erosion. So, let's talk about weathering first. So, weathering is the process in which rocks are slowly broken down into smaller pieces over time. So, when you think of weathering, I want you to know that that doesn't mean the weather like what's outside. That does affect it, yes, but we're not saying what's the weather of a rock. We're saying a rock is being weathered. It's being broken down over time. So that can happen from chemicals. So chemicals would break down and change minerals in rocks. Or that can happen from physical things like ice, wind, water, and temperature that would break down those rocks into smaller bits. So that's breaking, okay? Now, when we get to erosion is a little bit different. It's just getting worn down and carried away. So erosion is the process in which bits of weathered rock are carried away by the wind, water, gravity, or ice. So weathering happens first. That's what breaks it down into smaller pieces. And then erosion happens, and that's what carries those pieces away. Okay? So let's look at some examples of that. I can get my little pages apart here. All right, so this first one, it says, weathering is the process that breaks down landforms and rocks into smaller pieces called sediments that make up soil. Sorry, I'm trying to read it backwards. It's like flipped on the screen. So, weathering breaks down really big rocks and turns it into things that we call sediment. So that's the little bitty pieces that makes up soil, little tiny pieces of rock. So, we've got some examples here. It says ice weathers rock. So like when a glacier or different pieces, like just large pieces of ice move through rock, it can crack that rock apart. Because if you look right here really closely, this glacier is coming up through the mountains. It's going to end up breaking some of those rocks, especially if it melts and starts to push through some more. Then it says that water weathers rock. So think about all that water trickling down over that rock over periods of time. Maybe you've got some spots on your land at home where the water, when it rains, it really kind of like rushes through and like breaks down and makes little like ditches through the ground. So that's what that's going to end up doing. It's going to weather down that rock until it makes it like smoother. It's breaking off little pieces of it. So it's changing the way that rock looks. This rock probably didn't look this smooth when this waterfall wasn't there. Now that the waterfall's there, it's gone over it so many times that it has smoothed it out. And then it says that temperature change weathers rock. So if you look really closely, this was probably all super just flat and normal looking land before it was so hot and dry out there. If you look, that's making it start to like crack and break apart. Kind of like when your skin, it gets really dry in the winter. And it needs some like lotion or something like that. Or even think about when you get a sunburn, it gets too hot, it starts to peel. So that's what's happening to this rock. That temperature change is changing the way that the rock looks. And then it says wind weathers rock. So you see this giant chunk of rock over here? It's been weathered down by the wind. Look at this tree. It's being blown over like this. So obviously there are some harsh winds over there. So that wind pressing up against this rock is going to make this rock smaller and smaller over time. And then the last one, it says that roots and plants weather rock. So whenever you see these roots going through the ground like this, that's having to break apart the land to be able to make its way through the ground. So when you think of weathering, remember that weathering breaks it. Okay, now we're going to talk about erosion. So erosion is the movement of sediments or soil from one place to another by some kind of force. So whenever the rocks get broken down by weathering, okay, they're just sitting there in their little tiny pieces now. Well, now the wind or the water can take those pieces and make them go away. Whereas before, the wind probably wasn't going to push a giant boulder away very far. But if that giant boulder gets broken down into little bitty pieces, now erosion can carry that away. So wind erodes sediment. So it picks up the sand. You can kind of see it if you look really close. You can kind of see it blowing off the tops of these sand dunes here. So the erosion is happening because of the wind. It's picking up that sand from the top and blowing it away. Okay, water erodes sediment. So every time this river is rushing through here, any small pieces of rock or soil can get picked up and carried downstream because of this river, and then they would get put somewhere else. Waves erode sediment. So if you've ever been to a lake that had waves, or the beach, waves will erode the sediment. They come up and they pick up the sand and they pull it back into the ocean with them. So if you've ever, especially if you've made like a sandcastle or something, then you've seen firsthand how waves can come up and grab pieces of your sandcastle and pull it back. Glaciers can erode sediments. So those glaciers, whenever they freeze and they move, they're going to be picking up little pieces of soil and rock with them. So erosion takes it. So weathering breaks it, erosion takes it. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about is deposition. So deposition is the process where eroded sediments are set down or deposited in another place. So if you look right here in these sand dunes, the wind picks it up and blows that sand all over the place, and it deposits it in another spot. And this river delta, what happened here was the water would be flowing, and then it picked up so much of that sand and the soil that it moved it, and it made a split. It made like a really big hill where the river then split up. So deposition drops it. So we have a slow changes chant to kind of help you remember it. You know, we always like to put fun words and fun hand motions with stuff, so I figured why not do that now. So let me get this page folded so I can stop wiggling it around, making you sick probably. Okay, so we have weathering breaks it, erosion takes it, deposition drops it. Okay, so that was weathering breaks it, erosion takes it, deposition drops it. Okay, so that's just a fun little way to remember the difference between all of those. And on your landforms choice board today, you're just going to pick 2 more of these choices that you want to do, 2 that you didn't do last week, okay? So I went over these in last week's video, so if you need to have a quick refresher on what to do for each of these, go ahead and look at last week's video for a little quick memory refresher on that. Let me know if you have any questions.